Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the live webinar on trade facilitation for the F&B industry between ASEAN and Korea, organized by the ASEAN-Korea Center and Korea Importers Association. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Seo Misorang, and it's an absolute honor and delight to be serving as your MC this afternoon. 인사드리겠습니다. 서미소랑입니다. 반갑습니다. Now, it is our sincerest hope that through this afternoon's live webinar, we will be able to strengthen the networks and also provide practical information regarding the food and beverage industries of ASEAN and Korea. On behalf of the organizers, we would like to extend our sincerest gratitude to everyone, our two excellencies, speakers, panelists, and of course, everyone joining us online for taking precious time out of your busy schedules to join us this afternoon. All right, so without further ado, let us begin by inviting His Excellency Kim Hae-yong, Secretary General of the ASEAN-Korea Center, for the opening remarks. Please welcome His Excellency Kim Hae-yong with a big hand.
안녕하십니까? His Excellency Ung Butung, Ambassador of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam to Korea, and Chairman Mr. Hong Kwang-hee, Korea's Importers Association, and distinguished speakers and guests, ladies and gentlemen, and online viewers. Good afternoon. Let me first extend my warmest welcome to all of you online, joining us both online and offline for the Trade Facilitation Seminar on Food and Beverage Industry between ASEAN and Korea. Taking this opportunity, I'd like to express my gratitude to our co-organizers, Korea Importers Association, for its devotion and commitment in organizing this seminar. My appreciation also goes to all speakers for sharing their valuable insights in developing food and beverage industry in ASEAN and Korea. I'd like to also like to express my sincere appreciation to Ambassador Ung Butung, who has joined us, and ASEAN Committee in Seoul for their unwavering support for the ASEAN-Korea Center. The food sector is vital to the ASEAN region. The food value chain generates over $500 billion in economic production, accounting for roughly 17% of ASEAN's total GDP. This industry also employs over 116 million people in ASEAN, which accounts for 35% of total workforce. As a result, food industry is important to the region's economic well-being. Meanwhile, Korea's agri-food imports from ASEAN have more than tripled over the last decade, from less than $1 billion in 2010 to approximately $3.2 billion in 2020. So we are witnessing a steady growth of trade between ASEAN and Korea in the food and beverage sector recently. Against this backdrop, ASEAN and Korea, once again, seeking to further strengthen their economic partnership. Last November, Korea joined the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, known as RCEP, with ASEAN countries. As the world's largest FTA, accounting for approximately 30% of global GDP, RCEP is expected to bring more benefits to ASEAN and Korea. Especially, RCEP is set to go beyond the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, which entered into force in February 2017. So trade facilitation is a key element in multilateral trading system by simplifying and harmonizing customs procedures. The customs procedures and trade facilitation chapter of the RCEP agreement emphasize the importance of clarifying customs procedures, thereby reducing transaction costs as well as securing predictability, consistency, and transparency in the application of customs laws and regulations. RCEP is also significant to the food and beverage industry. It is because the complex sanitary and phytosanitary measures in each member are expected to be improved with its entry into force. The main purpose of chapter, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, to minimize its negative effect on trade while ensuring the safety of people, animals, and plants. So it is timely for ASEAN and Korean food and beverage companies to examine further business opportunities by utilizing RCEP agreement in penetrating into each other's market for mutually beneficial and sustainable growth. Let me also take this opportunity to introduce ASEAN Trade Fair, which will be held 10 to 13 of November in COEX, Seoul. As a follow-up event for today's seminar, the fair will be organized in conjunction with Seoul International Coffee Show. Through this event, the center is aiming to introduce ASEAN food and beverage products such as coffee and tea and dessert products, as well as to enhance business network between ASEAN and Korea. In closing, presenters and panelists are gathered here today to give us up-to-date information to utilize ASEAN-Korea FTA and RCEP agreement. They also share valuable information on quarantine and testing and import procedures in Korea and food and beverage market trends of ASEAN and Korea. So I believe today's seminar will serve as a platform to support and promote a more balanced economic partnership between ASEAN and Korea. I wish every success in the ongoing recovery efforts for all the businesses, and most of all, stay healthy. I thank you very much. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Secretary General Kim Hye-yong, for that warm opening address. Now, I'd like to remind everyone that simultaneous interpretation services are provided throughout this entire live webinar for your convenience. So the receivers are placed on the table in front of you. For Korean, please tune into channel 1, and for English, channel 2. Should you have any difficulties or problems with the receiver, please raise your hand and our staff will replace it for you. Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Hong Kwang-hee, Chairman and CEO of KOIMA. He will deliver his welcoming address via a video message. So please take a look.
Good afternoon. Your Excellency Kim Hye-yong, Secretary General of ASEAN Korea Center, Your Excellency Nguyen Butung, Ambassador of Vietnam to Korea, all business executives, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a great pleasure to welcome you for joining us at this webinar today. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all representatives from government offices and business executives for your cooperation. In particular, I would like to express my sincere thanks to Your Excellency Kim Hae-yong, Secretary General of ASEAN-Korea Center, for organizing this event, which is timely required. Looking back our relation, as Korea opened free trade agreement with ASEAN in 2007, your economy appeared to be more and more important community for Korean business players. Since then, we had experienced big development in terms of international trading. Here we have very important numbers in this regard. During the last 14 years of free trade agreement engagement, Korea's total trade with your economy increased double, from $72 billion in 2007 up to $144 billion last year, 2020. Among these, Korea's export last year rose 230% from 2007, whereas Korea's import showed 63% increase. Korea's trading balance stayed positive, and the balance itself surged up more than 6 times during the period, from $5.6 billion 2007 up to $34 billion 2020. Your total GDP stands as the number 6 in the world economy, producing $3.2 trillion last year, if we count the ASEAN as one nation group. Moreover, your total population, 660 million, represent as the number 3 in the world after India and China. All the above numbers support your standing as the major and important business partner if we speak consumer sentiment and consumption potential. Korea Importers Association, KOIMA, we are on our 51st anniversary this year. For the last 51 years of service, we have organized importers delegation to the global cities for more than 100 times. However, we had to stop this delegation business for the last 2 years since the pandemic started. And also, we organize KOIMA Summer Seminar every year, coming to cities in the Asian region in particular, as we look at your market high in value. Dear my friend ASEAN community, considering the above, for the time being, it is very important that we will have to stay with this virtual and keep up with this no contact. I hope that this virtual platform will benefit Korean consumers with price and quality competitive products. I'm also confident that more Korean importers will find more best product in the food and beverage sectors from the ASEAN market. This will make our relations closer and stronger in terms of trade and investment. And it will be an opportunity to jump to the next level of cooperation. Once again, I thank you all for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hong Kwang-hee, for that warm welcome. Now I'd like to invite His Excellency Nguyen Vu Tung, Ambassador of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam to the Republic of Korea, and also the Chair of ASEAN Committee in Seoul, for his congratulatory remarks. Everyone, please join me in welcoming His Excellency Nguyen Vu Tung.
Ambassador Kim Hae-yong, Secretary General of the ASEAN-Korea Center, Mr. Hong Kwang-hee, Chairman and CEO of KOIMA, ladies and gentlemen, participants, presenters, online and presenting here. On behalf of the Embassy of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam to Korea and the ASEAN Ambassadors Committee in Seoul, ACS. I would like to thank the ASEAN-Korea Center and the Korean Importers Association for having me in this webinar on the trade facilitation for the food and beverage industry between ASEAN and Korea. I would also like to extend my heartfelt congratulations on your efforts to organize this event. This is a timely event, especially when it is held in the context of the ASEAN ROK Summit that took place just yesterday, where our state leaders show their appreciation for the New Southern Policy Plus achievements and the belief of its continuation in the future. Indeed, for the last 20 years, since the establishment of the partnership between the ASEAN and Korea, and especially the last 4 years plus under New Southern Policy, Korea has become one of ASEAN's leading strategic partners. Our relations have been expanding rapidly along the three pillars of peace, prosperity, and people as we work together to strengthen the ASEAN's central role in the regional economic, security, and diplomatic arrangements. In addition, and especially, the bilateral relations between the individual ASEAN countries with Korea have also prospered, serving the interests of our countries and peoples. Let me now get back to the theme closer to our event today. ASEAN countries as well as Korea have been heavily affected by the prolonged COVID-19 pandemic. In this situation, production and supply chains are interrupted. Many businesses are facing hard time. Workers are losing jobs, with consumption decline and trade and investments volumes being reduced. Yet, we also see the efforts at economic and national resilience as and when the countries in individual and collective manners are gradually shifting to the strategy of living with COVID-19 and speeding up the economic recovery processes. With the RCEP agreements being signed for almost a year, Vietnam, as well as other ASEAN countries and regional partners, including Korea, are making efforts for the arrangement to be ratified at the earliest time possible and come into force from the beginning of the next year. The official entry into force of the RCEP will be an important legal basis as well as the bilateral FTAs, including the ones that were signed yesterday between Cambodia and the Philippines with Korea. For further promoting trade and investments in the region and providing a positive factor to promote economic recovery in Korea and ASEAN countries and elsewhere. The growing economic and trade relations, vibrant cultural and people-to-people exchange, to name just a few, have opened up many opportunities for ASEAN businesses in the field of food and beverage in the Korean market. Products from ASEAN countries are increasingly welcomed by Korean consumers and vice versa. But we can be more ambitious. The ASEAN and Korea markets are full of opportunities and potentials for the food and beverage products, as mentioned by Ambassador Kim Hye-yong and Chairman Hong Kwang-hee. The presence of products from ASEAN countries in the Korean market, however, is still modest, while the preferences for Korean products are increasing in Southeast Asia. As far as ASEAN countries are concerned, to turn potentials into reality, we have to do the following things. One, to improve our export competitiveness, to be better informed about the import regulations and procedures, market information, and consumption trends in Korea. And last but not importantly, to be able to meet the high standard of Korea market. So in this context, today's seminar on trade facilitation for the food and beverage industry between ASEAN and Korea will be and is a good opportunity for ASEAN businesses to learn more about Korea market and find possible Korean partners in order to gain better access to the Korean market, having Koinma as our long-time value partner. With that in mind, allow me to wish the webinar a great success, and I would like to wish all of you good health, happiness, and achievements. Thank you very much for your attention. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your congratulatory address. Now, before we proceed further, I would like to give you a rundown of what's in store for the rest of the afternoon. So there will be two sessions. For the first session, we have two keynote presentations, which will be followed by session 2, where we have 6 short presentations, followed by a roundtable discussion. Now, for our participants joining us online, should you have any questions that arise as the presentations are delivered, please don't hesitate to write the questions up on YouTube's live chat, and we will address those questions during the roundtable discussion. Okay, so let's proceed with session 1. Our first keynote presentation will be delivered by Ms. Song Mi-tong, the Director of Overseas Business Office in the New Marketing Channel Department of Korea Agro-Fisheries and Food Trade Corporation, also known as AT. So please welcome Ms. Song Mi-tong.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Song Mi-jung, Director of Overseas Business Office, New Marketing Channel Department from AT. Today, I'm going to talk about the food industry trend and how to utilize the AKFTA and other FTAs. First, I'm going to look into the situations in the food industry with a focus on the trend in the Korean food industry post-COVID-19. Second, I will go over how Korea's food exports have responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. Lastly, I'm going to explore ways to utilize the AKFTA, ASEAN-Korea FTA. First of all, let's talk about the food industry trend. According to the global data, which is a British research consulting firm, the global food market is expected to increase from $7 trillion in 2016 to $9.2 trillion in 2023, which is a 30% increase. By continent, the Asia-Pacific region takes up the biggest share of 37%, or $2.8 trillion, followed by Europe and North America. Many research institutes and media outlets at home and abroad are making predictions for a post-COVID-19 world. Let me look into the impact of COVID-19 on the food industry. First of all, the global pandemic has restricted cross-border movements, increasing untapped or online or non-contact consumptions. Amazon, one of the major global online stores, topped $100 billion of sales for the first time in the fourth quarter of 2020. Since then, the company's sales reached $113.1 billion in the second quarter of 2021, and again more than $100 billion in the third quarter of this year. Korean online markets are no exception. In the first half of 2020, Korea's online food market amounted to 19 trillion won, a 56% increase year-on-year. The experiences in COVID-19 pushed up a demand for dietary supplements and health-related food products. The volume of the dietary supplements and health-related food products in Korea is about to reach 5 trillion won in terms of the market size, and it is expected to grow to 25 trillion won by 2030. Now, let's talk about the people spending more time at home. As people spend more time at home, consumptions of home meal replacements, or HMRs, have increased. The volume of the global home meal replacement market stood at $90.7 billion in 2018, but it is expected to grow by 4% to $110.2 billion by 2023. The Asia-Pacific region in particular accounts for about 34% of the market, the biggest market share in the world. When you look at the proportion of the ready meals by distribution channel, major supermarkets were the main distribution channel for ready meals, but now early morning delivery and on-the-day delivery services have been expanding, consistently increasing the share of online distribution of ready meals, about 47% increase in 2020 compared to 2019. Fourth, the global expansion of Korean Wave has further promoted Korean food across the globe. K-pop band and the Korean culture expanding and sweeping through the globe. And you know the K-pop band BTS, Korean movies Parasite and Minari, and the recent sensation Squid Game are some examples of globally popular Korean culture. And those K-food featured in Korean dramas are gaining a lot of popularity. In Parasite, there was a japaguri or ramdon, and that type of food was featured in Parasite. And also dalgona, a honeycomb sugar candy from Squid Game, are some examples that Korean food appeared in movies and dramas are gaining popularity. The expansion of Korean culture leads to the expansion of Korean food culture, which in turn leads to consumption of Korean food. Yet, COVID-19 poses challenges to the trade environment. As you see in the chart, as a result of global lockdowns and movement restrictions due to the pandemic, the year 2020 saw more goods backlogged at ports and less cargo spaces on ships, thereby making imports and exports shrink 8.9%, the biggest drop in 11 years since the 2008 financial crisis. Now, against this backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, let me now talk about the current status of imports and exports of agricultural, fisheries, and food products. This table shows the current status of imports and exports of agro, fisheries, and food products in relation to its major FTA partners for Korea. As was discussed earlier, as of 2020, the exports to ASEAN amount to $1,899 million, accounting for 14.5% of Korea's total exports, while imports from ASEAN are $5,791 million, and this is slightly smaller than our trade with Japan, and it is a third of our trade with RCEP, but it is bigger than those with China and the United States and Australia and New Zealand, respectively. When you look at the size of the imports and exports, so the Korea's imports and exports with the ASEAN have both increased. In Korea, the percentage of agriculture to GDP is 2.3%, and the share of agricultural food products in the country's total exports is 1.9%, which is not really high. But It is bigger than LG and Samsung's exports of home appliances, such as TVs and air conditioners you commonly see overseas. And actually, these products amount to $7 billion, which is smaller than agricultural exports. K-food, along with semiconductors, has emerged as one of Korea's top 20 export items and one of 5 major consumables. In addition, when you look at this graph, this is the Korea's exports of agros, fisheries, and food to ASEAN. It started with $0.1 billion, but after the conclusion of the Korea-ASEAN FTA, that volume have dramatically increased. And backed by the recent New Southern policy, those exports toward ASEAN are dramatically increasing. Let me now go over how Korea's food exports have responded to the pandemic for the past 2 years. Many measures have been adopted to expand the export of Korean food, but let me look at the major keywords. The keywords for such endeavors include K-food branding, health food, non-contact or non-contact life, and non-tariff barriers. For the first keyword is branding K-food as part of marketing efforts. From the beginning of 2000, we have used ginseng, kimchi, and Korean Sichuan characters. And from late 2000, to increase overseas consumers' awareness and credibility of Korean food, we have used common brands for major fresh items such as strawberries, bell peppers, and pears. In addition, the health-related products and dietary supplements are receiving a lot of attention, and they are witnessing greater demand. And due to population aging and spread of COVID-19, there's increased interest in health issues. The demand for dietary supplements and health food, such as immunity booster food, fermented food, and gluten-free food, there are more demands for this. And while we promoted general food products before for general population, nowadays we are promoting new items such as dietary supplements and healthy food. The third keyword is non-contact. There is a movement restrictions due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So the Korean food industry has been creating an online and non-contact market, promoting online sales activities. So, online platform-based promotional efforts include a K-food cooking class with K-pop stars actively relating to the MZ generation, a main segment of the customer base for Korean food. And also, for those who are staying home due to the pandemic, the food industry has hosted an online K-food cooking contest and other fun experience-based marketing events. And also, they are engaging in promotional activities in connection with online shopping sites. And they are turning the COVID-19 crisis into a new opportunity by leveraging online platforms, and they're working with relevant organizations as well. Now, let's talk about ASEAN, our major trading partner. ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, was established with the signing of the Bangkok Declaration in 1967 for the purpose of promoting economic cooperation and laying a social and cultural foundation. It is home to a huge population, 660 million population, making the third largest market in the world, and ASEAN has abundant and solid human infrastructure there. And even though there was a setback in growth due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it is expected to return to the normal growth rate. And ASEAN is Korea's second largest trading partner has grown to be a post-China production-based and alternative market backed by Korea's new Southern policy. And due to the COVID-19, the online markets are dramatically increasing. So there are major online platforms, and ASEAN's online market is rapidly growing in the pandemic, and by 2025, it is expected to grow 32% to $87.8 billion. Let's talk about the ASEAN-Korea FTA or AKFTA. Korea signed its first FTA with Chile in 2004 and then signed a total of 17 FTAs with 56 countries, including the Course FTA in 2012, Korea-China FTA 2016, and Korea-UK FTA in January 2021. And yesterday, we concluded the FTA with Cambodia. According to Korea Customs Service and the Korea Institute of Origin Information, the share of FTAs in Korea's trade has expanded from 0.6% in 2004 to 72% in 2020. Let's look at the characteristics of Korea-ASEAN FTA. So this is the biggest and the first biggest the FTA that Korea signed with an economic bloc. And ASEAN is one of Korea's 5 major markets, including the United States, China, Japan, and EU. When looking at the concessions made, each ASEAN country has a different concession schedule. As for the utilization of the FTA in 2020, the AKFTA accounts for 54% of Korea's exports and 82.3% of imports, while taking up 47.1% of agriculture and fisheries exports and 94.2% of agros and fisheries imports. So the Korean agros exports are less than the imports from ASEAN. Let's look at the country of origin rules. Materials originating from ASEAN nations are considered as Korean homegrown, and for those items that do not have defined origin standards, there are some exceptions. For example, change of tariff heading CTH is applied, and also 40% of regional value content rule is also applied. And certificate of origin is issued by institutions such as Korea Customs Service and KCCI. Indirect verification is used in the AKFTA, so you should archive and maintain documents just in case of verification. And the reciprocal tariff system has been adopted in the AKFTA. By this system, if one country does not abolish tariffs for a certain product for protection of domestic industries, the importing country does not have to eliminate the tariffs for the same product, even though it has to be included on the concession list. Or you can apply the same tariff rates as the trading partner does. Currently, 4 countries, Indonesia, Thailand, the Philippines, and Cambodia, are using this system. In 2015, the AKFTA was amended. The reciprocal tariff system will be maintained with the 4 Asian nations, but the expansion of the items under the system is banned, and Korea and 6 other nations have abolished the system. Now, let me discuss how we can best utilize FTAs. These are the requirements for transaction. In terms of transaction requirements, both exporters and importers must be located within the ASEAN countries that signed FTA with Korea. For transport, products should be directly transported between the FTA partners without passing through the third country. As for items, only those items in the concession list can be traded under the FTA. For proper procedures, goods must be properly declared with valid certificates of origin. Now let's talk about the procedures for utilizing AKFTA. The first step is to check for a relevant HS code. The HS code is a 10-digit product classification number. So certain products, they have different concessions. And there are bilateral FTAs and multilateral FTAs like the AKFTA, so you should utilize the most favorable FTA for each product in terms of tariff benefits and the origin of country rules. So you need to refer to all the rules and concessions of FTAs and choose the most favorable one. You also need to identify the criteria for determining the country of origin. Depending on whether the product meets the criteria, their country of origin will be determined. Those criteria include CTC, value-added test, and specific processing criteria. Next, this is about determining the country of origin for export goods. Step 1 is after filing out the bill of materials, you need to classify the finished products and raw materials. And second step is you need to check the unit price and the cost of raw materials. And step 3 is checking the country of origin for raw materials. And step 4, determine the country of origin based on the country of origin rules. And the certificate of origin is basically issued by institutions. Now let's talk about how to utilize the certified exporter system. In the AKFTA, those importers certified by tariff authorities as having ability to prove the countries of origin, document submission is streamlined and simplified. So you should consider using this system. Now, regarding top 30 export goods, let me discuss what FTA is more favorable among multiple FTAs applied to ASEAN countries. So in terms of bilateral and multilateral FTAs, which FTA will be most advantageous? Let's talk about this. When it comes to agricultural exports, we just handpicked top 30 products to analyze which FTA will be most favorable. So each country has a different HS code classification even for the same product. So you need to have this in mind. For Vietnam, the Korea-Vietnam FTA is more favorable than the AKFTA and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP. For Malaysia, AKFTA and RCEP can bring similar benefits. For Indonesia, with reciprocal tariff system, except for a few items like coffee extracts, the RCEP offers better benefits than the AKFTA. For the Philippines, which is also under the reciprocal tariff system, so the RECP is a more favorable agreement, but the AKFTA is equally favorable. Yesterday, we signed the FTA with Cambodia. So as of now, AKFTA is more favorable when exporting agricultural goods to Cambodia. So as I said earlier, depending on the product item or HS code, the result might be different. So make sure to consult with experts for HS code classification before exporting goods. As the RCEP will soon take effect, you can refer to the RCEP manual for detailed information. As such, As I have so far discussed, there are more bilateral and multilateral FTAs being signed. So you can enjoy the benefits of the FTAs, but each FTA has different tariff rates and country of origin rules, so it is not that simple to figure out which FTA is more beneficial for you. To help you better navigate, Korea Agro-Fisheries and Food Trade Corporation is running the following programs. The first one is the Agri-Food Export Information Service Program. This program provides news and information on the trading partners, information on traded items, and the trading partners' importation system and statistics. Another program we run is the Customized Overseas Market Information Research Program, which conducts market analysis of export market as well as analysis of export goods and consumer surveys. And also, we are providing FTA consulting services to help you best utilize FTAs. To wrap up, ASEAN is a strategically and economically important partner for Korea, which is implementing the new Southern policy. In addition to the AKFTA, we are seeing more bilateral FTAs, for example, with Singapore and Vietnam being signed. So I believe we need to have this kind of occasion to develop our relations to the next level. Lastly, I sincerely thank the ASEAN-Korea Center for putting together this meaningful event. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sung Mi-jung, for that informative presentation. Let's now move on to our second keynote presentation. Mr. Abdulaziz, Senior Principal Assistant Director of Industry Development at the Ministry of International Trade and Industry of Malaysia, will deliver the second presentation. Now, because of the travel restrictions with the COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. Abdulaziz will be delivering his presentation online. So, Mr. Abdulaziz, are you able to hear me?
Yes, thank you.
All right, you may begin your presentation when you are ready.
Okay, thank you. A very good afternoon to my fellow colleagues and also the attendees for this particular webinar. Now, my presentation is on a brief summary on food industry. We refer only to the ASEP agreement that has been agreed previously in 15 November 2020 during the 4th ASEP summit. The agreements basically is covered on the 14,367 pages, which is comprising of 20 chapters. Among them is a market access, which schedules covering trade in goods, trade in services, and also investment. Next. In ASEAN, it consists of 15 countries. It's supposed to be 16. However, on only 15 that has been agreed and signed this particular agreements, which among them is also Korea, South Korea, New Zealand, Japan, China, and also Australia, and also ASEAN. This is the scope of the agreement. There is 20 chapters within this ASEP agreement. However, for today, I will only focus on two. There is trade in goods and also rules of origin, which includes an annex and a product specific rules. But before I go to that particular DIG, let's say I would like to also explain that some of the elements that are excluded in this particular agreement. This is the market asset and dispute settlement mechanism for the government procurements, grant and subsidy incentive by the governments, and also discipline provision on the export duty. This particular thing, basically the element has been excluded under in ASEP. Thanks. Now, the background of the for this particular ASEP or ASEAN, basically this is based on the World Bank data in 2019, where the ASEP participating countries where it account for the 29th of the global population or the 2.2 billion. This is based on the 2019 data. Okay, the GDP basically is on the 25.8 trillions, is very cool. Equivalent to ringgit Malaysia is 103.9 trillions, and or 29.44 of the world GDP. And also the merchandise trade among ASEAN parties amounted to 10.7 trillion or 27 of share of global in 2018. In 2019 itself, the 5 of the ASEAN Free Trade Partner Area Partners or AFPs were the major investor in ASEAN, contributing to 34.5 billion or 21.7 from the total of 158 billion of foreign direct investment. Among of these particular investors, also South Korea, where Samsung and also LG also part of this particular what you call numbers for investing in ASEAN. In 2019 itself, Malaysia export to ASEAN countries was valued at 560.78 million ringgit, representing of 56.4 of our total exports. On the macroeconomic impacts, basically I focus on Malaysia because now this particular asset I will look into based on Malaysia regards. This contribute positively to Malaysia economic development based on the working paper of East Asia New Trade Bloc, published by Peterson Institute for the International Economics in June 2020. Basically, once RCEP has entered into force, Malaysia GDP is estimated to increase by RM60 billion per year or 1.1 on nominal GDP. Based on the estimate, which is done by one of our agency, Matrade, a total export of ASEAN market could increase by 21 billion per year. This is a stronger integration and also basically it's a regional production network that will further boost overall trade activity among ASEAN and also with Malaysia. Also, this particular estimate is also made with all the 5 AFP, including Korea. Now, just a benefit in brief. RCEP provide an opportunity for Malaysian companies. This is based on Malaysian perspective. Because of this particular thing is offering market access to nearly a third of world population. So within that particular number of the population, there's a 2.2 billion. That particular market access is quite big and quite good. Huge. Sorry. Intra-regional source of raw material at a competitive price, meaning that we can source a lot of raw material from multi sources, which is can have a very competitive price, meaning that the price we can do a lot of comparison in terms of before we do the procurement of the raw materials. Integrating supply chains within ASEAN region, meaning that we have very strong link of business of trade because of within the ASEAN itself, the continent of ASEAN, meaning that we can make a very strong supply chains and also strong linkage to produce to provide a lot of this particular raw material among each other. Because of as far as we are concerned in Malaysia, we are not a resource-based country. So meaning that we have to import a lot of our resources from other parties, such as Indonesia, Thailand, and also China, and also Korea. And Korea also one of our biggest importer for natural gas, LNG, for the purpose of the utilities in Korea, everything. So that's a particular thing, how the integrated supply chain in ASEAN is good for these particular parties. Other than that, is promoting greater transparency, information sharing, trade facilitation, economic cooperation, standardization of rules relating to e-commerce, and also providing certainty in protection of intellectual property rights. In this particular agreement, we emphasize on IPR rights, so that all the protection will be given to any goods that we produce, and in that particular IPR will be protected among ASEAN parties. Now, this particular agreement will enter into force within 60 days. this particular, if say after Malaysia's complete or any other country complete domestic procedures and subsequent submit instrument of ratification to ASEAN secretariats. We need that at least 6 of ASEAN member states and also 3 of ASEAN FTA partners, so that you would have to ratify the agreement for it to enter into force. Meaning that out of 15, 9 of these particular members need to ratify. Then what we call the offset will be entered into force. Meaning that out of 10 of ASEAN, 6 of ASEAN member states, out of 5, 3 of AFP have to be ratified first. Then it will be entered into force. Now, let's focus on trade in goods. Trade in goods is a very common chapters and it's very what we call one of the key elements in any FTAs that ASEAN have involved. Also, I think any FTAs that I think Korea or any AFP involved also. Because of in this particular, the key element to achieve which include this particular granting national treatment to the goods of the other parties. That's number 1. Number 2, the reduction or elimination of custom duties, meaning that we're giving you a very good reduction of duties, what we call as a preferential tariff duties. Duty-free temporary admission of goods, reaffirmation of commitments in the WTO ministerial decision on the export competition, and elimination of scheduled export subsidy entitlements for the agricultural goods. This particular thing basically is on this based on negotiation among parties, that which is our goods that can be what they call given or eliminated during that particular negotiation. Now, this chapter also set rules on determining the applicable tariff treatment in case of different tariff preference applied by the party. All RPCs we call have this particular schedule, what you call as tariff commitment, which is in Annex 1. Annex 1 is basically annex of the particular agreements. Next. Apart from that, the provision on non-tariff measures that complement the tariff liberalization outcome is also include the elimination of quantitative restriction, which is also have to comply under the WTO. Okay, greater transparencies on the application of non-tariff measures, administrations of the import licensing procedure. This particular thing also need what you call, you guys can refer all these particular parties have to report to WTOs with any WTO members, and the application of the fees and formality connected to the importation and also exportations. Other than that, is how to, the party also have to conduct technical consultation on non-tariff measures that adversely affect trade between them and also provide for the possibility of future work to be undertaken. Meaning that this particular we still have the continuity to do the some negotiation regarding non-tariff measures that being applied by any of the parties. Okay. Apart from that, I just also want to touch on regarding what is one of the ASEAN working group, where we call it ASEAN Food, Agriculture and Forestries. This particular working group goals is to achieve the vision of ensuring equitability, sustainability, and also inclusive of growth, alleviating poverty, eradicate hungers, ensuring food securities, deepening regional integration, enhancing access to global market, and also increasing resilience to and contributing to mitigation and adaptation of the climate change nature. Why I want to emphasize on this particular what we call to in this particular presentation is because this working group also look into the availability of food for the nation, for the ASEAN. Okay, so based on this particular vision, meaning that that's why the food industry is one of the main what we call driver for the economic growth among ASEAN member states. For example, Thailand, they have a very strong in terms of agricultural products. They export rice, they export sugar, they export some of the what we call tropical fruits. So that particular providers is need to be what we call look into as a resources for these other parties such as Malaysia, Singapore, or Cambodia to import the what we call the resources of food, so that these particular resources in their particular country can be what we call maintained and also keep into a certain level of what we call as a securities. Apart from that, there's a strategic plan also that has been implemented until 2025. Then the priority area of cooperation is enhanced quantity and quality. As I mentioned earlier, there is sustainable green technologies, resources, management. This is particularly is based on what we call how to take care, what we call to develop more green technologies. Okay, next. Now, this is where I got it from the Oxford Economics based on October 2020. They emphasize on the demand side factors and also supply side factors. Now, why I would say that the importance of the food industry in Asia is because of number one, all the demand side factors is COVID-19 impact of food spending. ASEAN, basically, if you look into our what we call nature, we are what we call quite what we call I might say I would like to use the word is always hungry. We look for food every now and then. So basically, if we want to have food, meaning that we have to have this particular industry to be up, and then the supply has to be there. So the demand is there. So basically, when you say that COVID-19 impact on food spending is basically on the emergency side. When the each of the particular countries impose, let's say the movement control order. For Malaysia is movement control order. A lot of people will buy all this particular stock of food as a emergency stock. So this particular will affect on the supply change. But the thing is that the demand is there. Okay, if the supply did not meet the demand during that particular time, meaning that there will be a problem. That's number one. Number two, risk of food-specific taxes. Basically, what we say there, what we are referring to the risk food-specific taxes is that some of the food, because due to the health concern, for example, like the sugar beverages, product, some of the country impose additional tax because of they don't want people to buy the particular product too much, so that they won't get diabetes, or they would not go for overweight or something like that. Another thing is that risk of broad-based austerity measures. Broad-based austerity measures, basically there's a policy that being imposed by countries where certain countries they put certain policies that only 90% or only 10% can be export, 90% cannot be export. This particular policy or measures will affect this particular the demand side factors. Travel and tourism shares of GDP also based on how this your country. For example, the country that are highly dependent on the tourism will need this particular arrangement. What the first speaker has mentioned just now, how they promote the Korean culture in food and also in other things, right? So this particular effect on how the demand side factors of the food actually. The supply side factors itself, when you look into the policy restriction to trade, during the pandemic, what is happening is most of the country is close the door for export the product because of they want to look into the the internal market, the internal demands. This is what we call as certain element of security. Now, for example, this is just for example. Let's say country A, they don't want to export rice to others because of the farmers cannot go to the farm or to plant or anything due to the movement control order. So the number of food, the rice currently is being saved for the internal country. This particular thing will affect the other countries, so let's say country B, that dependent on country A for the supply of rice. So this particular thing will affect the supply side factor, what we call as the supply side factors problem. Number two is the potential impact of agriculture subsidy cut. Basically, this particular is on the how the country impose the internal policy, and then the subsidies not being given for the agriculture products, so that particular things. And food production cost, basically it also involved on the how you want to ship the particular product, or how you want to send to the particular product. Basically, it's shipping costs and other other additional administration costs. This particular will affect a lot. Exchange rate volatilities basically is, I think that particularly is normal. What is happening, even though during before the pandemic, this particular thing is one of the major factors, because of some of the currency drop, some currency increase, so there will be a fluctuation of the pricing of the particular foods. Okay, next. Now, as far as we can see here, that the food processing, what we call as the food processing, also the food industry also comprised. This is comprised. This meaning that the list given here is not limited to this particular the list here. Meaning that cocoa and cocoa preparation cereal, processed seafood, dairy products, prepared and preserved vegetable, processed meat, sugar and sugar, coffee, tea, spices, and edible product and preparation. This particular is one of the list of the product that we need to in this to survive, for example. Now, next, this is the import value food. This is the source of Statista that I just collect from Korea and China. So you see, the comparison is quite huge, but the thing is that it's simple because of the population. Meaning that I just want to show you how the trend are. Meaning that for Korea, even though it's still maintained under the 30 billion, but it's increasing year by year. From 21 in 2012, 21 billion, it increased to 27 billion. But for China, it 368 billion in 2012, it increased double to 615 billion by 2019. So, meaning that this particular industry will not subside, or will not give you any, I might say that it would not retrench anything in terms of demands. The demand will increase tremendously year by year based on the population. Now, next. This is, as I mentioned you earlier, the import value of food in Malaysia from 2012 to 2019. It increased more, nearly double, from 36.09 billion in 2012 to 51.46 billion in 2019. So it shows that this particular industry in Malaysia itself have a high demand. Next. Now, apart from that, for this particular food industry also, it also provide us with a lot, with the labor, the employment, where in 2015 until 2020, there's a there's an increase of 383,000 to 447,000 requirement for employment. So meaning that this particular industry, one of the good industry for investment and also for development of the country. Now, next. Now, for just for your reference, this is 4 items that where I try to compare on the using HS code, and also under the RCEP tariff. Now, I just compare between Malaysia, Korea, China, and Japan. Okay, so basically for 1507.90, if you look, there's only one dot for Japan. Okay, because of this particular dot, Japan is not using a Bilateral tariff. It's using the specific tariff. So the specific tariff for this particular product, for soybean, for Japan is 13.2 yen per kilo. However, for other countries like Malaysia, Korea, and China, they are using ad valorem tariff, meaning that now they are they're using percentage. For China is 9%, for Korea is 5%, and also for Malaysia also 5% for the base rate. Now, if you look at the chart, China and Korea did not offer this particular product, under ASEP. So meaning that for anybody that want to import or to export this particular product into China or Korea, they have to pay MFN duty. For Malaysia, for this particular product, because we are not a resource-based product, so we have to import the raw material to produce the the final goods. So based on the first year itself, we have reduced it from 5 to 0%. Now, move on to the second product is 1511.90. This is palm oil. Okay, where Malaysia is one of the biggest producer of palm oil products. You see, for China, they maintain at 9%. Okay, they did not reduce it from year 1 until year 5. Year 5 is meaning that is until 2023 and above. Now, basically for China, sorry, for Malaysia, Korea, and Japan, have sorry, the base rate for this particular product is 0, and they maintain it until end of the particular commitment. For Korea, they reduced from 2% to 0% from year 1, and Malaysia from 5% to 0% from year 1 until the end of the commitment. Sorry. Now, for next product is 1604.13. This particular product basically has some sensitivity because of this is fish, sardine in 8 type containers. Now, for Korea, the base rate is 20%. However, they also under this particular ASEAN commitment, the duty will reduce from 20 to 18 to 13 and also to 8 until 0 on the year on the 4th quarter of the particular period of years. So this how this particular thing what we call as Korea commitment for this particular product, meaning that on the year on the 15 years starting from 20, let's say starting from 2022, this particular product will reduce on the year 1, meaning that on 2022, and also will be reduced until on the 15 years to 0. Until that particular product will be 0 from that on. For Malaysia, this particular product has been 0, and also we have maintained it as a free duty. For China, it's 5%, and they reduce it to 0 on the starting from the first year. For Japan, is on the 10%, and then it reduced to 5% until certain until the end of the commitment. It's also the same with the 1702.19. This particular product basically also some of the AFP have very certain sensitivity. This is what we call as the sugar syrups. Okay, for example, for Korea has maintained it until 20, and then by the end of the period they go to 15, and also Japan, and they reduce it on the 15 years. Okay, for China, they reduce it on the base from the first year until the end. Malaysia keep on its free duty on this particular product. And also this particular product, as I shown also in this particular diagram, there's a ROPSR for this particular product, where CC or RBC40. Certain product, let's say like palm oil, sardine, and also sugar is always CC. CC can also, because of this particular product, need to be produced from the source, meaning that for sugar, still for sugarcane or from any of the particular raw material. For sardine, meaning that the fish has to be caught within the party, and also this particular process need to be done from the what called raw fish to this particular sardine. And palm oil, basically this particular is always solely obtained because of what you call for you to import that particular goods and then to process it is within the same chapter actually. Okay, next. Now, rules of origin. I think the colleagues from the first presentation just now has explained on the rules of origin. The rules of origin basically is just what you call how you want to determine the originating of the goods under the ASEAN agreement, where that particular good will be eligible for the preferential tariff treatment. Either you will be using the certificate of origin or declaration of origin. So this particular thing is just to say that this particular is origin from Korea or from Malaysia or from Indonesia or Thailand. Now, this chapter lists a minimal operation, basically, and then also process considered insufficient and to confer originating status on goods using the non-originating material, meaning that this particular thing will emphasize that what type of process is considered as insufficient. The minimum process, there will be a listed of the minimum process, so that if that particular process being done, meaning that automatically that particular good will not confer origin. Okay, so meaning that they have to be met, certain element of the PSR need to be met there. General principle, also the good comply with the requirements set forth by the ASEP ROO in order to confer ASEP origin status and annual preferential treatment. As I mentioned earlier, that this is the general principle, meaning that all goods need to meet the rules of origin. Okay, now under rules of origin chapter, there's 2 sections. There's 35 articles and 2 annexes. Okay, under section A is the main text of rules of origin, where it's a 15 article. Basically, it's a very general, where it's all the verification process, everything, and also set off there in the section A. Section B, basically the operational, how this particular certification procedure, what type of thing that you need to do when you apply the certificate of origin. Basically, this section B is very important. Article 3A, basically the product specific rule, meaning that any other specific rule or the requirement that need to be met for that particular good is under the NSA, what we call as a specific rule, meaning that all this particular thing is based on HS code at 6-digit level. Minimum information requirement is basically what is the minimum information that need to be there in the certificate of origin or the declaration of origin, meaning that this is the minimum information. The custom may request more, however, this is the minimum, meaning that you cannot go less than that. So the minimum of this information need to be in the certificate of origin is under Annex 3B, and also custom have the right to request further. Now, for the Annex 3A just now, for the PSR set out based on HS 2012, the PSR have the around 5,205 tariff line at 6-digit level. So there's quite a lot of numbers of more or less like all this particular HS code is in the PSR itself for the ASEAN agreement. Next. Apart from that, okay, new element I introduced in the ASEAN ROO is basically the proof of origin, meaning that the mixed mode, what I mentioned to you earlier, regarding the COO or DOO. This particular introduction of this for proof of origin to have a mixed mode is because of we want to do the better trade facilitation for the exporters, so that they won't have to come to the issuing authority to get the the certificate of origin from now and then just delay on the shipment, delay on the documentation process. And said, then we introduce the declaration of origin. Declaration of origin basically declared by the exporters. But there's a process that need to be done, where we also agree under 3.21 with the approved exporter, meaning that the declaration of origin can only be done by the approved exporters, meaning that the exporter need to apply with the issuing authority first, then the issuing authority will do all the necessary process, due diligence, and then once they've been endorsed and approved, and then to become an exporter, they can apply using the declaration of origin. The MIR basically is to improvise the version of MIR in the ASEAN Plus One, so that because it's comprising two elements. So this what you call under the NXPB, MIR is basically is the what you call the improvised version of the minimum data requirement. Next. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is all from me regarding the RCEP and also in the just a brief summary regarding the food industry under RCEP. This is the reference what I use for what I call most of this particular presentation. There's a lot of reference also being used, but the things that I just put just the main what I call topics under the main site that I use for to put in as what I call one of the what I call element in this particular my presentation today. So that thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdulaziz, for that very comprehensive presentation. Once again, please give a big round of applause to our two keynote presenters, so Ms. Song Mi-jung and Mr. Abdulaziz. And with that, we will wrap up the keynote presentations and session 1. We will now adjourn for a 15-minute break and come back at 3:35 p.m. Korean Standard Time. So once again, we will see you back here at 3:35 p.m. Thank you.
ASEAN, a key partner of Korea. With its strategic location and a rapidly growing economy, ASEAN today has become one of the most sought-after partners in the world. Based on a strong foundation of friendly relations, ASEAN and Korea have developed close partnerships in the political, economic, socio-cultural sectors. Now the two regions are working together to build a community of peace and prosperity centered on its peoples. The ASEAN-Korea Center was established back in 2009 with a vision to build a lasting and genuine partnership between ASEAN and Korea. The center contributes to promoting shared prosperity between ASEAN and Korea by expanding trade and investment by facilitating cooperation in future industries. We aim to strengthen sustainable and future-oriented cooperation in culture and tourism, and promote mutual understanding and respect by expanding two-way cultural exchanges between ASEAN and Korea. The center is also laying the foundations for the establishment of the future community of ASEAN and Korea by raising public awareness on the importance of ASEAN-Korea partnership and facilitating exchanges among the youth and professionals of the two regions. Based on trust and mutually beneficial partnership, ASEAN-Korea relations have made remarkable progress over the past 30 years. And by connecting the peoples and sharing prosperity, The ASEAN-Korea Center will make every effort to build a more peaceful and prosperous community of ASEAN and Korea.
If I may, I can encapsulate what the ASEAN-Korea Center is doing in one word. It's connecting. We connect people, we connect companies, and we connect countries between ASEAN and Korea in trade and investment, culture and tourism, and people-to-people exchanges. As ASEAN and Korea march together toward the future, the Center will continue to strengthen our partnership in a more sustainable, future-oriented, and mutually beneficial way.
Korea, full of endless challenges and passion. We welcome you to the fascinating import market of Korea. Korea, the 9th largest trade power in the era of $1 trillion trade volume. Korea's import market, which was worth only $1 billion in 1977, surpassed $500 billion in 2011, and the scale continues to expand despite the slowdown in global economic growth. The import volume from China, United States, Vietnam, Mexico, India, etc., has been increasing in recent years. And with the continuous growth of import for major items such as mineral products, electric and electronic products, machinery, petrochemical industrial products, steel metal products, agricultural fisheries products, grown up to the 9th largest import power in the world. With the FTA in force with 55 countries, Korea's import market is becoming an arena for competition between world-class products. Pursuing the value of free trade, the Korean government is also improving the import environment and implementing various policies to expand imports so that excellent foreign products can easily enter the Korean market. The government aims to become the world's 5th largest trading nation through innovation and investment. For this, Korea Importers Association is constructing and constantly updating the database of Korean importing companies, and conducts research and government proposal for the distribution system improvement of world trade and relaxation of export and import regulations, while sending KOIMA import delegations to resolve global trade imbalances. Here is KOIMA as the nation's only import specialized economics organization, contributing to the growth of the national economy as well as the alleviation of trade imbalance through efficient import. Consisting of more than 8,000 importing companies, KOIMA has 58 subcommittees that each belongs to one of the 5 categories: capital goods, raw materials, consumer goods, goods from emerging industries, and goods categorized by function. So, with specialized knowledge and business know-how, KOIMA has been the most reliable and optimal business partner for foreign companies. has cooperated closely with foreign diplomacies and trade-related agencies in the world to help foreign companies find great partners in Korea and be successful in the Korean market. KOIMA also has MOUs in force with approximately 150 trade-related organizations in 70 countries worldwide. Together, they are working with partnership to strengthen the information exchange and the cooperation in the world trade market. KOIMA sends KOIMA import delegations, consisting of Korean importers, to more than 10 countries every year to discover outstanding foreign products and introduce them to our market. As a part of non-governmental diplomatic activities to resolve trade imbalances with global markets and expand trade with global countries, the delegation holds one-to-one trade consultation sessions, providing opportunities for companies from both countries to meet their best business partners. Also, Import Goods Fair, organized by KOIMA, has been held annually with companies from more than 100 countries participating. Being currently the only exhibition focused on import goods in Korea, Import Goods Fair has been introducing promising foreign products to Korean market, and Import Goods Fair is improving to World Trade Fair, where exhibitors, participants from abroad can meet Korean buyers through B2B consultation. KOIMA has constructed a database platform centered on Korean import companies and provides Korean importers information of 140,000 data. KOIMA also provides various services such as market research services and individual trade consultations for foreign companies that want to meet Korean import companies. The Korean import market is open to every company in the world and offers endless possibilities. KOIMA will always be your great partner for success.
Wait for the mic to be turned on. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. We will resume with session 2. So if we could ask everyone to take their seats, that would be greatly appreciated. Now, before we formally begin, I'd like to remind our online participants that if you have any questions during our presentations, please do not hesitate to write them up on the YouTube live chat, and we will address them during the roundtable discussions. So let's begin our 6 presentations. For the first one, I would like to invite Mr. Chon Young-soo, Deputy Director of the Department of Plant Quarantine at Korea's Animal and Plant Quarantine Agency. Please welcome Mr. Chon Young-soo.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Deputy Director Chon Young-soo from Animal Plant Quarantine Agency. Our agency is in charge of conducting quarantine inspections of animals and plants. For many important guests in Asia, I am very honored and pleased to have an opportunity to make a presentation on procedures for plant quarantine and import permit of Korea. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me as a speaker today. Today, my presentation consists of several parts. First, introduction of Animal and Plant Quarantine Agency, legal basis for plant quarantine, and plant quarantine and import inspection and import risk analysis. First, let me introduce our agency, Animal and Plant Quarantine Agency. Our agency has several sections. 3 services. Actually, those 3 services were combined: animal service, plant service, and fishery service. So these combined services were implemented by our agency, but through the amendment and the restructuring in 2013, a certain service was transferred over to other departments. The current Animal and Plant Quarantine Agency was established in March 2013. In the past, our agency was located in Anyang, Gyeonggi Province, but as the government offices were relocated to other regions, our agency also was relocated to Kimcheon in North Gyeongsang Province. This shows the organization of Animal and Plant Quarantine Agency. We have head office, regional offices, and centers. Currently, this agency is staffed with 1,100 people. We have Department of Animal Disease Control and Quarantine, Department of Plant Quarantine, and Department of Animal and Plant Health Research. We have 3 departments, and then under these 3 departments, we have 23 divisions. And regional offices are usually located near ports and airports. So currently we have 6 regional offices that include one in Incheon, Yeongnam, Kunsan, Jeju, and Seoul. So we have a total of 6 regional offices. Under regional offices, we have district offices. So the actual plant quarantine procedures are conducted at district offices. As for surveillance and control of livestock animals, we have about 13 regional offices. Now let's talk about laws and regulations that support our plant quarantine services. As for plant quarantine, we have legal grounds. As you see on the slide, we have Act and enforcement ordinance and enforcement regulations. And we have about 114 notifications on this topic. I believe as a single entity, we have the biggest number of notifications. So about 40% of these notifications about exports, and about imports, we also have notifications for each item and notifications on certain agreements. So we have about 80 notifications on imports in coordination with trading partners. So the purpose of the Plant Protection Act is to contribute to security and promotion of agricultural and forest production, and thereby to protect natural environment. And the Plant Protection Act supports our quarantine services. So we conduct quarantine inspections of export goods and control of pests inflicting harms to plants, and exotic pest monitoring and epidemiological surveys. These are all included in the relevant act. Regarding planting quarantine, let's talk about what items are controlled. So basically, these items are subject to plant quarantine. So basically, all the plants, the storage packages, storage places, packing materials, plant products, and organic products or organisms are subject to plant quarantine. And also, any object that might include exotic pests are subject to plant quarantine. What is the definition of plant? So plants include all the plants, including living plants and seeds and germplasm. So as for food, fresh fruits and fresh vegetables are subject to plant quarantine as part of food imports. And for pests, any species, strain, or biotypes of plants, animal, or pathogenic agent injurious to plants or plant products. These are all categorized as pests. And as for plant products, unmanufactured material of plant origin and those manufactured products that by their nature or that of their processing may create a risk of introduction and spread of pests. So if only the outward shape has changed, but it has still maintained the plant nature, it is regarded as a plant product. Now let's talk about the Korea's pest management system. Mainly under this system, we have regulated pest, provisionally regulated pest, and non-regulated pest. Why do we categorize a pest into these three categories? So when we find a pest in the process of plant quarantine, we categorize those found pests into one of these categories. Depending on the category, the quarantine measures might be different. So as for regulated pests, pest of potential economic importance to Korea is included in the regulated pests. These pests should not be present in Korea, even if they are present, but they are not widely distributed and they are officially controlled. There are two types of regulated pest. One, prohibited pest. Second, controlled pest. For prohibited pest, a highly dangerous, high-risk pest such as fruit fly is included in this category. And in the areas where such prohibited pests are present, if products are from this area or products are going through this area, then these products are prohibited. And if such prohibited pests are found in products, the relevant shipment will be discarded or be returned. And as for controlled pests, this other than prohibited pests among regulated pests are categorized as controlled pests. And for this type of pests, we disinfect the consignment and shipment when the pest is found during the import inspection. And regulated non-quarantine pests include the pests that are found in plants, and they could cause some economic damages. So there are about 60 species of pests for regulated non-quarantine pests. Even if they are found, the quarantine measures are not practiced. Now let's talk about the planting quarantine for imported goods. Our agency conducts quarantine inspections for plants, for pests, and for soil, wood, packaging material, and aircraft and vessels, which are the transporting vehicles. As for plant quarantine, just like other countries, we inspect the seed and the fresh and living plants and fresh fruits and vegetables and timber and lumber. And as for pests, we conduct quarantine inspections on insects, fungi, bacteria, and viruses. Currently, as for prohibited pests, there are about 77 species of pests. And for controlled pests, we have designated about a lot more, about 2,000 species of pests. So these are provisionally regulated pests, are regulated provisionally in the region. And as for soil and wood packaging material, the chemical treatment is made on those products. And as for vessels and aircraft bound for North America, the Asian Asian moth are being inspected, and we attach the certificate of the approved inspection for such pest for products bound for North America. Let's talk about import prohibition. So there are prohibited plants and plant products are certain plants and plant products are prohibited from being imported to Korea. So if host plants and plant products growing in the areas distributed with prohibited pests, then they are banned. The key examples are tropical fruits and live insects and pathogens. As I said earlier, soil and plants contaminated by soil are banned from being imported. And packaging materials made from the plants prohibited from being imported are also prohibited from being imported. Certain prohibited products are sometimes allowed to be imported. For example, if a pest is scientifically needed for scientific research, they are, in certain cases, allowed to be imported to Korea. And also, if exporting country suggests a measure to eliminate the pests, or then the export countries request, and if on the condition that the exporting country presents the pest elimination measures, then we give exceptions, so they can export the products to Korea. Now let's talk about how the animals that are preying on these prohibited pests are also being banned from being imported. Now let's talk about the procedures of import quarantine. So there are 4 steps. So depending on the type of item, all these 4 steps are applied, or sometimes only 1 step applies to a certain product. At a port of entry, there's an on-site inspection. So within 10 days of arrival at the port, you need to conduct the quarantine inspections, usually in a bonded storage area or on vessels or PQ zones. These on-site inspections are conducted. If pests are found at the ports or airports, or if the seeds are found, they are sent to the laboratories for test. So they collect specimen or samples, and those samples are sent to labs for further test. So it takes 2 to 7 days to complete the lab test. So usually the steps 1 and 2 will be enough to complete the import quarantine procedure. But sometimes after importation is done, post-entry quarantine inspections are being conducted. For example, fruit trees and bulbs are inspected after the importation. They have to be planted in the orchard, and then they wait until they grow and be planted, and then quarantine inspections are conducted. And sometimes we go to the exporting country and then conduct inspections. We have inspection agreements with exporting countries, and according to the agreements, Sometimes we are requested to go to the exporting country to conduct quarantine inspections there on site. So this is the diagram that shows the procedures of the importation inspection. Now, let me briefly talk about the on-site inspection. So this type of inspection is conducted at a storage and bonded area at the port. So spaces, tables, lights, and tools should be prepared to conduct this on-site inspection. So they take and collect samples from shipments, and they send samples to labs. The second one is lab quarantine test. The samples taken from the port, and all the seeds and seedlings and fruits and vegetables, they are subject to lab test. If the on-site inspections find pests, and those pests are categorized as a result of the lab test. And after the lab tests are conducted, and the decision is made to whether to what kind of decisions and what kind of actions will be taken for the relevant goods. And as for post-entry quarantine, we have a quarantine growing area. So in that designated areas, the relevant plants and seedlings and roses and potato and root tubers of sweet potatoes and strawberry seedlings are planted. So if the government designated areas cannot accommodate them all, some of them are sent over to private farmlands. So let me talk about how the customs clearance is processed. Since 1997, we established electronic data interchange system. If the imported plants are to be inspected and processed through customs clearance, the applications for customs clearance should be made through UniPass. And if that plant result is sent over to the relevant agency, and the relevant agency makes decisions based on the inspections, and the result will be notified to the importer or exporter. But usually, in most cases, you don't do it manually. You just do it on the internet. You don't have to visit the actual agencies. And the word packaging materials, disinfection, and the precise quarantines, all these matters are reflected in the data system, so you can refer to the system. And this is the ratio of imported plants by group in 2020. So about 23%, the biggest share is just the regular plants, and flowers and lumbers. These are also imported a lot. Due to the COVID-19, even though despite the COVID-19, the inspection workload didn't decrease. Actually, it is on the rise. So this is the importation of fresh fruits and the exporting countries. We actually imported 700,000 tons of fruits. The biggest share is banana and pineapples. About 60,000 tons of pineapples were imported, and grapes also were imported in the volume of 60,000 tons. And Chile is one of the major exporting countries of fruits. Now, this is the import risk analysis section. There are tropical fruits that are banned from being imported. That's what I said earlier. So regarding prohibited tropical fruits, how we allow them to be imported. So through the import risk analysis, we make it happen. So as for import risk analysis, there are 3 stages. First, the application is filed for approval of importation, and then assessment and management are conducted after that. So filing, assessment, and management stages. There are 3 stages. So the exporting country requests for approval to allow the prohibited fruits, and there is a list of pests as agreed with the trading partner, and certain pests should be managed. And there are actually 5 stages for managing pests. And after that, there are administrative procedures. Just a drafting notification is part of that. It takes about 6 months to finish the administrative process. So it takes about 8 to 9 years from the filing of approval to the completion of administrative process. It's such a long time. So let me summarize what I've been talking about so far. Currently, when you look at the number of items for which exporting countries requested approval of importation, there are about 200 items. Some are in the process being imported, and some have not yet to enter the process yet. So we have over 100 the request right now. So when the exporting country asks for the permission of importation, we need to conduct the importation risk analysis. So we have to identify how prohibited pests will be managed in cooperation with the exporting country. So we need to make sure those pests are not attached to the imported fruits. So in coordination with exporting country, such measures can be decided upon. And there are international standards and guidelines. So we listed the methods on the slide. If the fruits are from the areas where such pests are not found, and the proof should be provided. And also, the chemical and radiation and heat treatment should be done to get rid of the pest. And also, there's another method that is called a system-based approach. So while growing those plants, systematically, they need to ensure those pests are not affecting the plants. So once these conditions are met, the relevant notifications will be made, and then the importation will be allowed. So we have to make an agreement with the relevant country. So in that process, we can give some support. So with this, I have talked about the risk analysis and importation procedures. The year 2020 was the International Year of Plant Health. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, all the planned events were held up until this year. So under the support of the UN, we have held relevant events. So regarding plant quarantine, so it is not just the issue for Korea alone. So we cannot address it on our own. We need to work together with other countries and those countries' relevant organizations. We need to make sure that movement of prohibited pests should be prohibited. And we make such efforts in this regard.
Thank you very
for
much,
listening.
Mr. Chon Young-soo, for your presentation. Now, before we continue, we are running behind schedule, so I'd like to kindly remind all speakers to keep your presentations within the pre-allocated time. Let's move on. Our next speaker is Mr. Kang Song-pil, Deputy Director of Import Food Policy Division at the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety of the Republic of Korea. Please welcome Mr. Kang Song-pil.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Song-pil Kang, Deputy Director of the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety of the Republic of Korea. It is my great pleasure to brief you on Korea's safety control measures and policy for imported foods. The order of my presentation is as follows: the introduction of the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, the import declaration status, and the safety management system for imported food. First of all, I'll introduce the MFDS. Back in 2010, the ministry was relocated to Osong in Chungcheongbuk-do province from Seoul. And the ministry was made an affiliated organization to Prime Minister in March 2013, thereby becoming a command center of food safety control, including livestock and fishery products. And the Imported Food Safety Policy Bureau was established in March 2017. Here is the organizational structure of the ministry. The ministry is armed with 2,006 employees. 649 of them are working at the headquarters. We have 8 bureaus, and one of them is the Imported Food Safety Policy Bureau, which is in charge of safety of imported food. The bureau is in charge of setting up relevant policies, and it also conducts on-site inspection, and it is in charge of customs, and it also manages the domestic distribution of imported goods. We also have 6 regional offices and 17 imported food inspection centers. So the actual inspection is done by these offices and centers. Let's move on to the import declaration status. So here are items for import declaration: all kinds of food and beverage, including agricultural and fishery products, food additives, and also food utensils, containers and packages, and health functional food, and livestock products, including meat. So let's take a look at the import status for the past 5 years. So we have import food from 170 countries, and the number has steadily grown by 2% or more. As of last year, so we the biggest share was taken up by processed food, which was 38%, and it was followed by food utensils, which was 18%, and livestock 14%, and fishery products 12%. And let's take a look at the figures taken up by ASEAN countries back in 2020. The major exporters included Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Main imported items were cassava, raw materials such as sugar and banana. And now let's move on to Korea's safety management system for imported food. In 2016, the content on imported food from 4 different acts was extracted, and then the Special Act on Imported Food Safety Control was enacted. So in doing so, the focus was shifted from customs clearance inspection to management, covering everything from local production to logistics in Korea. So in the production phase, we register foreign food facilities, conduct a sanitation assessment, and on-site inspection. So during the customs phase, we strengthen inspection on the importer's responsibility for food safety and import food. And lastly, in the logistics phase, we collect samples, conduct inspection, and train importers. So let's talk about the foreign food facilities registration process. They should be registered either by importers or facilities, and the application should be submitted through the Imported Food Information Bureau. So once the registration is done, it is valid for 2 years. And now let's move on to sanitation assessment. It is applied to livestock products, including pork and beef. So the ministry ensures that the importers follow through 6 steps. So the first, once the importing country requests for import, a sanitation questionnaire is sent out. And the answers to the questionnaires are submitted and reviewed. And based upon the answers, the on-site inspection is conducted. After that, once everything is deemed appropriate, the request is approved. And then sanitation terms on imported goods and relevant certificates are discussed. And finally, the establishments, those facilities are registered. So once all these 6 steps are followed through, the requesting country can then start exporting goods. And now let me walk you through the on-site inspection procedures. So we conduct the on-site inspections to see whether or not the foreign food facilities are actually conducting business appropriately. So in case these facilities decline to be inspected, or the inspection findings suggest that there may be some risks involved, then the importation from those facilities is suspended. And now let's take a look at import declaration and inspection. Once importers submit an import declaration form via the customs system, the relevant documents are reviewed and a field test and a lab test are conducted. And then finally, a random sampling test is done. So when If everything is deemed appropriate, the certificate is issued. If not, it is declined. So document review takes about 2 days, and field test takes about 3 days. The random sampling takes about 5 days. Here's what each test entails. The document review literally means reviewing relevant documents submitted with the application by the importer. The field test is done to physically inspect products. So which means the inspector actually goes to the field physically and conducts tests. And the lab test is conducted when products are imported for the first time. The importer has a record of non-compliance or risk. And lastly, the subject of the random test is automatically selected by the ministry's electronic system. So when we conduct these inspections and tests, there are several main points to consider. We need to determine whether the products meet the standard and specifications, whether the manufacturing methods are appropriate, whether the field certificates are proper, if the product is in suitable condition and properly labeled. Yeah, so these are things that we have to go through. So aside from the special act I briefly mentioned, we also have some regulations regarding on-site inspection, sanitation, and customs clearance. About 11 of them. And also when it comes to the regulation regarding the standard and specification for imported goods are as follows. So this slide shows the ministry's official website. You can access the information both in Korean and English. Once you access this information, once you access this website, you should be able to get the information you need. This is also a website where you can access information and statistics on imported food. So this is the contact information and my email address. If you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to contact me. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kang Sung-kyun, for your presentation. Let's move on to our next presentation. For that, please join me in welcoming Mr. Park Si-won, the Deputy Director of Importer Food Policy Division of the Korea Customs Service.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Park Si-won, Deputy Director of Importer Food Policy Division at Korea Customs Service. I am very pleased to have this opportunity to introduce to you Korea's import and export clearance systems. Let me first briefly introduce Korea Customs Service, and then talk about the import clearance system, and then the export clearance system. First of all, to brief you on the mission and current status of Korean Customs Service. The Korea Customs Service secures fiscal revenues from tariffs, and it manages trade and foreign exchange flows with other countries and regulates and controls narcotics, goods involved, and terror attacks and harmful products for public health and environment. My agency was established in 1970 as a government agency separate from the Ministry of Finance. Until the 2000s, this agency actively supported import and export to promote trade. In the era of FTAs, it has increased its functions of providing consulting services, and nowadays it is playing a bigger role in protecting the public's health and safety by banning illegal harmful products such as narcotics from entering the country. Our agency has 29 divisions under 7 bureaus and a main office, and it consists of 5 regional customs headquarters, 29 customs offices, 16 centers, and 3 affiliated organizations. There are 5,262 employees in total. And as for the workload, the agency processed 78,545 cases of import clearance and 47,892 cases of export clearance and collected approximately 58 trillion won in taxes. Now let's move on to Korea's import clearance system. If you try to import goods into Korea, you need to make an import declaration with the customs authority. The import declaration is an expression of an intent to import goods by a person wishing to import goods who declares the details of importation with the head of customs office in accordance with the requirements and standards set by applicable laws. By declaring importation, taxable items are confirmed, tariff rates are determined, applicable laws are identified, and the duty of tax payment is defined. Regarding when to make an import declaration, in principle, after arrival of a vessel or an airplane landed with goods, you should make a declaration, but exceptions are granted. So you are allowed to declare the importation 5 days before the arrival of the vessel, and also you can also declare before and after arrival at a bonded area. The importation declaration before departure or before arrival should be made with a relevant customs office that has the jurisdiction over the expected point of entry. When it comes to declaring before and after arrival at a bonded area, the relevant customs office that manages the bonded area should receive the declaration. Who can make a declaration? The freight owner or customs agent can do that. Customs agents or brokers are those who are entrusted to file import, export, or return declaration in accordance with the Licensed Customs Broker Act. They include individual customs agents, corporate brokers, customs corporations, and customs clearance corporations. Now, let me talk about the procedures of import clearance. Once the freight owner or designated customs agent makes an import declaration, the case goes through Korea Customs Services cargo selection system and then through PL reviews and documentation screening. If the case is classified as inspection required, it is assigned to customs official in importation department. If there's no problems found in the process of inspections, the importation declaration is accepted. As for the types of examinations, PL examination is to see if the declared goods are appropriate, and documentation screening is for reviewing relevant documents. If the case is classified as inspection required, then there will be more than documentation screening. The documents and actual goods will be cross-checked to see if they are matching. As for food and beverage, in the process of examination and inspections, a customs official will check through a single window on their importation approval from the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety. And through the single window, the importer will find out the result. But if there's no approval from those agencies, customs clearance for the products will be pending. As such, on the phase of import and export clearance, verification is made as to whether the importer or exporter meets the requirements for approval as defined by applicable laws, and clearance is granted if the requirements are met. This system is called Customs Office Has Verification System. For importation, 40 acts, and for export, 13 acts are defining those items subject to this system. These items are directly linked to the public health, social security, and environmental protection. If they're not verified at the clearance stage, they can cause irrecoverable damage or huge social cost. Single window is a one-stop system that enables you to declare imports and exports and check requirements and file applications through UniPass. Currently, this system is connected to 46 organizations for the convenience of import and export declarants. Before the system was introduced, an importer or an exporter had to request the relevant agency to provide information on requirements and then have the requirement approval certificate issued. And then they used a UniPass to make a declaration and had to submit separate documents to the customs office. But after the adoption of single window, an importer or an exporter can check all the requirements and file for approval of requirements through single window inside UniPass, and relevant agencies will notify the result to the customs office. So the importer or exporter only needs to type in their requirement approval number in the system on UniPass. They don't have to submit all separate documents to the customs. Customs officials check the requirement verification document linked to the approval number, and if everything's okay, the declaration will be accepted. Let me now talk about the AI-based electronic customs clearance. Any import goods subject to PL declaration are cleared through AI clearance procedures. Without interventions of customs officials, artificial intelligence will be utilized to complete the clearance. About 35% of the total declared cases are processed through AI clearance, and the percentage will gradually increase. The items subject to AI clearance mainly include products imported by AEOs, authorized economic operators, and low-risk goods imported by non-AEO companies. So if your company is designated as AEO, you can enjoy express clearance skipping customs inspections. If you export goods to countries with the AEO system that have a mutual recognition agreement with Korea, you can skip importation inspections or receive priority inspections in those countries. With this, I would like to move on from the import clearance system to the export clearance system. In principle, you need to make an export declaration with the head of the customs office that has jurisdiction of the location where goods are. But exceptionally, for brand new vehicles that are loaded onto a cargo vessel, you are allowed to declare the export on board the vessel. Customs agents, export freight owners, or finished product suppliers can make a declaration for exports. Now let me tell you about the procedures of export clearance. Once an export declaration is filed, the case goes through Korea Customs Services CS system and will be classified as automatically accepted, document screening required, or inspection required. If there's no problem found, then it will be accepted. And also, there's automatically accepted category, and this category refers to products whose export declaration is automatically accepted within the export clearance system. Even if the goods are classified as examination required, if a customs official does not conduct examinations, it will be automatically accepted as well. So as was discussed earlier, those items subject to head of customs verification or goods to be returned due to discrepancies with export contract or imported goods on the condition of re-exportation are all subject to document screening. Once the export declaration is accepted, those goods should be loaded onto a foreign trade vessel within 30 days of the receipt of the declaration, but the loading period can be extended within 1 year if any convincing situations occur. If goods are not loaded within the loading period, fines of 2 million or less will be imposed, and the head of the customs office can cancel the receipt of the declaration after investigating the causes. The export of food and beverage follows the same procedures with other general export goods. And unlike the case of importation, the process of checking requirements are met is not mandated by law. With this, I'd like to conclude my presentation. Thank you
very
for
much,
your
Mr.
listening.
For your detailed, informative presentation. For our fourth presentation, he is already walking up to the stage. Please welcome Mr. Kim Young-hoon, Director of Sangha Farm.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Young-hoon Kim. I'll brief you on the Korea's food trend. I'll first take a look at the food consumption trend in Korea, F&B trends in Korea, ASEAN food import status in Korea, followed by Korea-ASEAN FTA case. Let me walk you through the food consumption trends in Korea first. In 2018, if you take a look at the search terms, when it comes to the health functional food, diet popped up, and home meal replacement related keywords were salad and snack. When it comes to food tech, platform delivery were the keywords. Then now let's take a look at the current current keywords in the sphere. So we have two major key terms: home cooked meals and delivery at dawn. So as you can see, the HMR products and frozen foods, they have seen their sales soaring up. And the sales of meal kits has also gone up. As you can see, 36% is taken up by broth products. And in terms of main dish, we have fried food and rice-based products. We also have noodle products. They are primarily meal kits. We also have fried rice and instant rice. We also have tteokbokki, which is stir-fried rice cake. So in terms of meal kit, I think you should take a look at the following three categories. We have cup rice, and we have spam, we have soup with meat. We also have dumplings, fried pork. We also have seafood meal kits. They are widely consumed. We have octopus and shrimp-based stir-fried rice. When it comes to home-cooked meals, I think this has garnered a lot of attention because of the COVID. And because of the COVID pandemic, people tend to eat in. So we have seen the sales of sauce, spice, seasoning, and oil going up. And I told you about the delivery at dawn, also known as early morning delivery. Please take a look at the left side and the right side. The left side items are primarily ordered online, and the early morning delivery is done on the right. So those items in the middle are both ordered online and also ordered through early delivery. So we have processed food, vegetables, meat. So those that have to be consumed quite quickly, they are ordered. So I have lined up the category of early morning delivery products based upon popularity. So meal kit is the most popular, followed by meat, bakery, jam, and rice. And now let's move on to food and beverage trends in Korea. So we have four major trends. So we have HMR products. So as you can see on this graph, the consumption is going up. The market size, rather, has gone up as well. And so in the wake of the outbreak of COVID-19, we have seen the meal kit products skyrocketing. And the second trend witnessed is health and immunity. Obviously, consumers have shown a lot of attention and interest in the healthy products. So red ginseng is doing quite well. And kimchi is known to boost our immune system. So kimchi has gained some popularity as well. And another thing is using food to treat certain conditions or diseases. Let's say the special meals prepared for diabetes patients or for the elderly. So I'm not sure if you can take a look at this, but we have this diagram that shows how much you can actually chew and swallow. So the elderly people obviously cannot chew and digest as well as youngsters. And recently, the meat substitutes have garnered a lot of attention. So we have this label, the brand called Beyond Meat. So it is a foreign product, and we began importing their products. And Lotte Food is also introducing similar products. And Lotteria has also introduced plant-based burger. So they are primarily made with beans. So bean-based meat substitutes have been introduced to the market. So these are also, there are other plant-based products, such as almond milk and bean-based mayo. And the fourth trend witnessed is the ESG management trend. ESG is an acronym for environment, social, and governance. So it's all about social responsibility of corporates. So when it comes to the environmental protection, people have shown a lot of interest. So companies have made effort to produce products to cater to those needs and wants. So the one on the left side is milk, which comes without straw. This decision was made to protect the environment, obviously. And in the bottled water market, what is hot is selling bottled water without labels. And I'm sure you like Korean seaweed products. And we have seen a lot of products coming out without the plastic trays. And on the right-hand side, you are looking at the cups and straws that are not made of plastic. So cafes provide customers with alternative products other than plastic-made cups and straws. So this table you're taking a look at is based upon the statistics of 2019. So ASEAN 10 countries data has been taken a look at. we took a look at the processed food, and we have seen the sale of seafood increasing. If you take a look at items, we have snacks, mango, sauce, meat, candy, and frozen seafood items are gaining popularity. This slide shows you what you should watch out for when it comes to non-conformity. When we import food from your countries, which means when you are exporting goods to Korea, you must take a look at these items. The proper application and relevant documents, you should be meticulous. Last but not least, let's take a look at a Korean ASEAN FTA case. These cases include my own experience as well as my colleagues' experience. So we used to import carrots primarily from China, but we began importing carrots from ASEAN countries, including Vietnam. You have to take a look at the size. And if you package products like this on the right-hand side, it is difficult for us to accept them. Let's take a look at the frozen vegetables. So these are individual quick frozen items and block quick frozen items. So we used to get the raw materials and then process them in Korea. But now we are importing processed products. So with these frozen vegetables, what you have to watch out for is that in Korea, based upon the type of food we are cooking, we basically cut and prepare vegetables very differently. So as you can see, for soup and stew, the type of the vegetable shape is different than when you are chopping up for cooking curry. So you have to think about what these vegetables are used for. And based upon the usage, you then can prepare or cut the raw materials like sweet potatoes. And these are processed food items, which means these are processed and prepared in your countries. So school cafeterias use them quite frequently. And before the COVID pandemic, we had a lot of seafood products imported, including fish cutlet and menbosha, which is a Chinese fried seafood product. So we do have market demand for these products. These two products have garnered a lot of attention. We have this watermelon drink that has been very popular recently. On your right, we have red hot chili pepper powder. Lastly, I would like to note the Korean customers, obviously international customers in general, I think. People love what is good in taste and quality. To satisfy your customer, to cater to these needs, obviously we have to ensure stability, safety, and relief. So when these are provided, when these qualities are guaranteed, then consumers will be ultimately satisfied with your products. So based upon the Korean F&B industry's trend that I have touched upon, I hope you can succeed in doing business in Korea. So I wish you all the best. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kim Yong-hun. Next, we have Mr. Choi In-ho, the team leader of GSC International. He will brief us on the latest trends of the Korean coffee market.
네, 안녕하세요. 저는
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jano from GSC International, which is a company that distributes raw coffee beans. Today, I'm going to talk about some trends in sourcing beans. First, let me talk about how we source raw coffee beans for Korea. Second, the market trend in Korea. And third, my suggestions and ideas for successful advancement to Asian markets. First, let me talk about the trends in sourcing raw coffee beans and cases. Currently, the trends in sourcing raw coffee beans are focused on supplying coffees that meet the diversified needs and preferences and taste of customers. Businesses are communicating with farm owners using social media and emails to let them know the quality of coffee and coffee notes that would meet the taste of Korean customers, and they are testing various types of coffee produced from local farms to source and supply coffees. And this is a new trend. And currently, my company is obtaining 600 to 700 tons of coffees annually from ASEAN. Now, first, we focus on obtaining beans for commercial lines, and second, beans for premium coffees and specialty coffees. To find these types of beans, we work together with KOTRA and Korean embassies in Asia and other organizations, and they are actually cases where these organizations connected us to farm owners. To briefly talk about what we do to source good coffee beans, in order to find high quality beans, we constantly communicate with farms about regional issues and Korean consumers' taste. And we thoroughly conduct a quality assurance of coffee samples provided by farms, and we are sending feedback to those farms. That way, farms gradually understand and know the quality of coffees that Korean consumers want, and they supply quality coffees that our consumers want. In order to maintain continuous relationship with farms, we actually visit the farms and invite the farm owners to Korea's largest coffee event, Seoul Cafe Show, and they join our booth and taste coffee made from the beans they supply to us. And we talk a lot about their production plans for the next year as well. Let me talk about the trends in Korea's coffee market. The first trend is home cafe trend. So more and more people are enjoying coffee at home. So we call it a home cafe trend. And this trend is becoming very important in the market as they demand easy to make and quality coffees. So we see newly launched drip bags and automatic brewer machines, and the first group espresso machines and grinders for home use are being launched in the market, indicating the growing home cafe market. In addition, various RTD beverages and instant coffee markets are also moving in tandem with the current trend, offering single origin and decaffeine coffees. So the general population's taste for coffee is getting more sophisticated. So those coffee lovers are enjoying coffee at home, and they post their activities with coffee on social media. The way they consume coffee, where they enjoy coffee have changed, but demand for coffee is still on the constant rise. Second trend is the popularity of low-price coffee markets and Robusta coffee. Low-price coffees are still preferred by many people, and over the last 5 years, one low-price coffee brand, so its franchises, increased to 1,500, indicating much popularity of low-price coffees. And they are quite cheap, and 30 to 40% cheaper than regular coffees. And this trend has a lot to do with increased convenient delivery services for coffee in the pandemic era. In these low-price coffee franchises, they need cost-effective beans, so they are highly dependent on beans from Asia. Recently, more customers are looking for Robusta coffee beans, indicating increasing positive views of fine Robusta coffees that offer pleasant bitter taste and texture preferred by the general public. Currently, the low-price franchise market is expanding, which facilitates commercial coffee markets, and specialty coffee markets are also growing together, creating a coffee market where customers' various tastes and demands exist. The third trend is increasing demand for decaf coffee. I think decaffeine coffees are even more preferred by people in the post-COVID-19 era. And it has a lot to do with growing home cafe markets and specialty coffee markets. As more people spend time at home in the pandemic, more and more people love to enjoy coffee at home. So there are more people who enjoy decaf coffees than caffeine-based coffees. More people are enjoying decaf coffees. The size of the decaf market and the quality of decaf coffee are increasing. Specialty coffee farms and decaf processing companies are doing their best to enhance the flavor and fragrance of decaf coffees. When looking at the sales of decaf coffees compared to 2019, the sales doubled in 2020 at my company. This year, we'll also see more than double sales compared to last year. This is a definitive shift and change in the market. And there is a case where Asian coffees were decaffeinated and distributed to Korea. Since decaf coffees from Asia are rare in the Korean market, it received positive reactions from customers. Even if it's the same batch coffees, depending on the first-line importer's screening facilities, the quality becomes different. Screening and sorting facilities that separate defect beans and foreign bodies can impact the quality of coffee. This is a very important factor for distributors. Domestic distributors, including my company, are strengthening quality-related process, and it can be very advantageous for Asian coffees, I think. The home cap trend, franchise, and specialty coffee markets are leading the growth of coffee markets. And if we reflect consumers' needs in the market, I think we can facilitate and boost the Asian coffee market. Let's move on to the third part of my presentation, my suggestions for successful advancement to the Asian market. Our clients usually prefer coffees of first, sweet flavor, second, less sour taste, third, medium and over body, and with lingering umami. So already we are using a lot of Asia-produced coffees, and those consumers who enjoy Asian coffees also have a lot of interest in specialty coffees and purchase them a lot. Consumers choose what type of coffee to drink every day, just like they choose what they're going to eat for meal every day. There's one example where one type of Asian coffee that we provided continuously enjoys great responses every year. That is Indonesia Mandailing coffee, so-called Giling Basa. This type of coffee was processed in a semi-wash method. It offers unique taste and body. Every year, its quality is improving, so we have a lot of expectations of this coffee. To give you my personal thoughts on Asian specialty coffees and commercial coffees, I hope more customers would know the unique characteristics and high quality of Asian coffees. So we can apply COE and auction coffee programs to Asian coffees so that many more people can purchase and enjoy Asian coffee continuously. I think it is one of the methods we can ensure success of the coffee market. And another thing is that the most Robusta coffee beans are harvested and exported from Asia. If we could supply high quality Robusta or fine Robusta easily, I think we can open a new era of blending coffee. So this is what I have prepared for my presentation. Once again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to make presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tae Ho, for your presentation. Now it is already time for our last presentation. And for that, I'd like to invite Mr. Michael Lim, the Managing Director of Hyurim Limited. Mr. Michael Lim, are you on? Mr. Michael Lim, are you able to hear my voice?
네, 들립니다.
Okay, you may begin.
Hello, thanks for the invitation. Please give me the introduction of my company and share my experience. My name is Michael Jinsuling of Hyurim Limited. My company was established in 1984 and involved in import-export business, mainly importing raw agricultural material, particularly from Thailand and Indonesia. Today, I would like to introduce you to Asian food sourcing based on my experience. First of all, sourcing high-quality food materials at a reasonable price is a major competitive advantage for the companies. For this, companies must basically import a minimum load that can be price competitive. So a certain level of basic usage must be guaranteed. In addition, you should be careful because we're importing in a situation where the place of demand is not secure, so accompanied by problems such as financial pressure on the company, inventory storage cost, and deterioration of food quality due to long-term storage. We imported food materials such as rice and fresh eggs from Thailand, apply them to the government or distribute them in the domestic market. Let's talk about import rights first. As in any country in the world, there are products that are particularly reluctant to open imports in that country. Among them, rice was the most representative product sensitive to market opening in Korea. Accordingly, Korea signed an agreement to suspend tariff for 20 years from 1995 to 2014, despite strong pressure from World Trade Organization to open the market in order to protect farmers. As a result, all rice import into Korea was imported through the government and distributed in the domestic market. Due to this import and distribution structure, the government purchased rice from domestic trading companies that had overseas supplies through bidding, and also sold for domestic distribution through bidding. I'll show you the table. This is the total volume of the rice import into Korea. Currently, Korean government is importing about 450,000 metric tons of rice. And among them, about 10% of rice are milled rice. I mean, other 90% are the brown rice. Since year 2015, tariffication has been carried out to open up the importation of rice into Korea. But according to the provision of the agreement with the WTO, the same amount must be continuously imported every year after tariffication on the total amount imported in year 2014. For this reason, most of rice import into Korea is processed through the government. Moreover, as a tariff rate, the rice product is determined to be 513%. Private companies cannot directly import and distribute rice because they do not have the price competitiveness with domestic rice. Because of high tariff rate, making it impossible to conduct business. Therefore, most of the rice imports from overseas is still imported and distributed through the government. Most of the rice imports are made through the government tenders. Therefore, quality standards and inspection methods are also set up by the government. And imports are carried out through the quality inspections. After imported rice arrives at the port, plant quarantine and food inspection and additional quality inspection set by government and carried out. Although the bidding is led by government, the import of goods is entirely conducted by private companies that have won the bid on CIF and CIP terms on behalf of the government. As the transportation is also carried out by the company designated by the government, there is an additional delay in dispatch and warehousing until the imported cargo is delivered to the government designated warehouse through a government designated transportation company, resulting in additional cost. However, as it is an import business for the government, we are performing stable overseas sourcing in the sense of that there is no burden on inventory and no risk of payment on the condition that we supply the entire amount to the government. We are sourcing companies with management skills. It is judged that the success and failure of domestic distribution can be divided according to the freshness of the product. Above all, in sourcing of food-related ingredients and food. Next is about the fresh egg. Because of the outbreak of domestic bird flu in year 2016, numerous of chickens were discarded due to massive killing and infection of domestic chickens, resulting in a shortage of eggs in the domestic egg distribution market, which led to the surge in egg prices. Accordingly, the government inevitably implemented egg imports to resolve the egg shortage and stabilize the price. However, until year 2015, egg could not be imported because of the strict import inspection standard, restrictions in the country allowing imports, the maintenance of low domestic sales price, and only some processed egg products like frozen liquid egg products were imported. Under these circumstances, the government tried to import the eggs quickly. The imports of egg was delayed due to the strict import inspection standards and restrictions in countries that allowed imports. It was only after the temporarily allowing the importation. As eggs were allowed to be imported from Thailand, which had been banned under the government measures, we quickly sourced the Thai exporters to import an eggs. As mentioned earlier, the certain level of the usage, demand can be delivered at the most competitive price was guaranteed due to the price surge due to the rapid shortage of the eggs in the domestic market itself. However, because of the hastily sourcing products and suppliers in such an urgent situation, the verification of the quality of the products available from the supplier, which is the most important standard in sourcing food and food materials. and the systematic system for the quality management and the maintenance of all the companies is insufficient. Moreover, due to the short shelf life of the egg products, after carrying out the accompanying inspections upon arrival in Korea, the expiration date was not long. It was like 45 days shelf life, which caused difficulties in domestic distribution and sales. If the characteristic of these sourcing products and the verification of the company's quality management system are insufficient, problems that have been discussed may arise, and eventually the lack of continuity of the business may result in damage. Well, lastly, the pattern of the consumer has changed a lot because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and moreover, the lifestyle of the MZ generation who pursues the way of living alone and leading an easy life. Sourcing of food and ingredients are required. This is my report, and thank you very much for your kind listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Michael Lim, for your presentation. And with that, we will wrap up all 6 presentations for session 2 and commence our roundtable discussions. Before we officially begin, though, we do need to set the stage up, so please bear with us for approximately 10 minutes, give or take, while we set the stage up. Thank you very much. So, we have 2 participants who are joining us via Zoom. So before I hand off the floor, I would like to check Mr. Michael Lim and Mr. Abdulaziz. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I am.
Okay, all right, okay. So this roundtable discussion will be moderated by Mr. Cho Jung-hyun, the Director General of COIMA. So without further ado, Mr. Cho Jung-hyun, the floor is yours. Yes, that is perfectly fine.
Good afternoon. I am Jo Jung-hyun from Korea Importer Association. Glad to meet you all. Today, I think we had a really excellent presentations. They were very informative and useful. Thank you very much for the excellent presentations. And the government's regulations and the actual commercial practices, we learned a lot about them. Thank you very much. Korea and ASEAN are exchanging with each other, and they had FTA in 2007, and it's been already 12 years since the signing of the FTA, and trade balance is very positive for Korea. So for the past 12 years, the trade surplus have increased about 6 times. So it's pretty good trade with ASEAN. So when you see Korea's exports to ASEAN, that has increased 230%, whereas Korea's importation from the ASEAN has only increased 63%. So I think we need to increase imports as well. That's one of the key agendas in terms of trade facilitation. So I don't have many questions actually because of the great and comprehensive presentations, but still, let me give you a very quick question. My question goes to the Animal and Plant Quarantine Agency, Deputy Director John Young-soo. In your presentation, you said the pests in the imported goods should be quarantined, and that's very important in your presentation. So exporters and exporting countries are well aware of that, I'm sure. But in advance, the categories of pests, is there any ways to know about them in advance prior to exportation? So when you go to the web page of our agency, there are lists of regulated pests. So that list is notified on the website. So that content is in English. When it comes to the list of pests, we use academic names for the pests, so the foreign countries can easily understand them. So exporting countries can preemptively find out the list of pests, right? In general, there are agreements with the trading partners. So there are a list of pests regulated according to those agreements. So my agency, KOIMA, has a lot of exchanges with the countries in the world as well as ASEAN. For example, Brazil in Latin America, and Hungary in Europe. So we import meat from these countries. So actually, the meat products from those countries have yet to be arriving in Korea because of the quarantine procedures. So regarding that, this question was raised. You actually go to the exporting country and then conduct inspections on site there, right? So currently you said over 100 countries you are conducting on-site inspections, right? I don't clearly remember the number of the agreements for in-site inspections. Since I'm in charge of plant quarantine affairs, I don't know much about the meat inspection. I think the same goes to the plant quarantine. So when you go to the exporting country and conduct inspections, does that incur costs on the part of the exporting country? So when it comes to the travel costs, so according to the agreements with the trading partner, the receiving country should cover the travel cost. So even when we receive foreign officials and they conduct on-site inspections in Korea, and receiving country, in that case Korea, will cover the cost. So the receiving country will cover all the cost for travels that is involved in on-site inspections. So why don't I give another question? This is another question that goes to Deputy Director John. The frozen vegetables and dried fruits, how do you conduct inspections on them? So in my presentation, I talked about live vegetables and fruits. So if those pests and pathogens can contaminate, they are subject to inspections. For frozen products and powder products, at the point of importation, we need to conduct an inspection one time, and after that, only documentation screening will suffice. We don't have to see the actual products. Only documentation review will be enough for certain dried and frozen products. Thank you very much.
So I would like to pass the mic to Young-Hoon Kim of Sangha Farm. So we briefly talked about frozen vegetables and dried fruits and included in the meal kits. And they can be viewed as a finished products. So once those products are brought in, what type of inspection process or procedures do you have to go through? When it comes to importation, so obviously there are authorities, representatives of authorities here. So I think they are better prepared to answer that question. But anywho, we have to get our documents reviewed. And another thing we have to focus on is we conduct a detailed inspection, whether it's done randomly or not. So obviously things get held off because of that. When it comes to vegetables, Korean consumers take a look at the back label as well. So we have to thoroughly conduct pesticide residue tests. So all that is taken a look at.
Next question goes to Director Park Ji-yeon, the Customs Office. In your presentation, in the process of importation, if the requirements are not met, the importer or importing corporations have to do some complementary procedures. Is there any guidelines for that, or case by case, do you request them to complement the procedures? Regarding food and beverage, if the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety and the quarantine offices do not approve them, their processing and clearance will be impending. For example, there's a lack of documents, then we let the exporter know that the approval letter is needed. So once they bring that approval letter, their products will be cleared. In your presentation, you mentioned AEO. So it also involves the mutual recognition agreement. I think it's a very good system. Even AI clearance system is very convenient for importers and trading companies. So do you have this mutual recognition agreements with all the ASEAN countries? So for AEOs, the trading partners should also have AEO system and then a signed mutual recognition system with Korea. In my recollection, I think not all ASEAN countries have introduced AEOs, and also not all countries, only about 30 countries have signed a mutual recognition agreement with Korea. So the importers and exporters can be benefited if we sign more agreements with more countries. So there are countries in ASEAN that have yet to sign the mutual recognition agreement with Korea. Then in that regard, what kind of inputs and advice you can give to us? See, the customs offices should sign the agreements based on agreements. So relevant efforts should be made And when there's a conference, like WTO conferences, we individually approach to have such agreements to be made with Korea.
I would like to pass the microphone to Mr. Song Pye-kang. Of your presentation, you mentioned about the sales done via online. So is there any control measures that you take, your agency takes? When it comes to the materials that do not contain food, if the products are brought in from overseas directly by the consumers, we upload the labels, or rather ingredients of those products on our website. And then we try to control that certain sensitive products are not brought in directly by the consumers. Of the presentation, you talked about imported product safety control measures, and the registration is valid for 2 years. So after 2 years, what happens? So does it get extended, or do they have to apply for a new registration? You should reapply for the registration, which will then be valid for 2 years again. I'm not quite sure if this question should be directed to you, but there are 6 phases in relation to livestock. Lastly, the foreign facility or establishments are registered. So how long does that take? So when countries ask for importation and approval for it, the entire process takes about, I suppose it depends. In that process or procedures, we have to take a look at the application, and the application has to be submitted, and there are related procedures to follow through. So until the approval is made for importation, it's difficult to say 2 or 3 years. I cannot give you a definitive answer. But in general, though, how long does that take? I would say 3 to 4 years. Over 20 years in some cases. So it's a difficult journey, I would say. Lastly, Mr. Kang, you said, so the English expression you used was a properly labeled. So are there any standards in relation to labeling? So we do have notification on how to label products properly on the packaging label. So the standards must be met. We have Michael Jinsu Lim joining us online. It's not a question, but you mentioned that. I do have another question for you, Mr. Kang. During Mr. Lim's presentation, he talked about green trend. So for example, we have unlabeled bottled water. So if those products are imported, are there any things that we have to consider? It's difficult for me to answer that question, sorry. That is not my domain. So I have to excuse myself. Certain things Well, he told me that there would be certain questions that he might not be able to answer properly. I suppose that was one of the questions.
Mr. Taino, when importing raw coffee beans during the pandemic situation, it would be hard to go over to the farms and identify beans. So how do you source beans nowadays? So each producing site before COVID-19, we visited those sites and tasted beans and then decided whether to import them or not. But as you mentioned, the situation doesn't allow us to do so. So we have close contact with exporters and we receive a lot of samples and then test those samples. That's our best option right now. Our agency, Korea Importer Association, deals with Latin America countries, and Latin America has a lot of raw beans producers, and they send a lot of beans to us. And so we kind of are baffled. What do we need to do with such a large amount of beans? So maybe, hopefully, I should give them to you. So we can work together that way. I think it's a good idea. So usually I practice lady first policy, but my last question goes to our lady here, Director Song Mi-jung. Recently, the Korean distribution market has been dwindled. The volume traded there has decreased because the global distribution market has received a setback. And what kind of impact the Korean market had because of that? As I mentioned in my presentation, so there was a distribution disruption, and it was hard to secure transporting vessels, and also fares for charting vessels have also increased. So we have experienced difficulties with importation and exportation, that's true. But nevertheless, as you saw the statistics, the importation has actually increased compared to that of last year. And also distribution channels have been expanded and diversified, including the online distribution channels. So we are seeing a great shift in the trend. But next year, we will have a post-COVID-19 era, and we are going to transition to the area where we live and coexist with coronavirus. So in my department, which deals with the import and exportation of agro products and distribution of those products. So next year, since we are going to coexist with COVID-19, we're going to make more efforts to promote Korean agros and fisheries and food products. And also it was a great opportunity to learn about the ASEAN market today. So Korea's food products exports are very important, but I think we can create a win-win situation with ASEAN, so we can develop our relations to the next level. So in that regard, we should find a good model of cooperation. Thank you. So earlier, I received questions from the floors. So the question goes to Director Jun. Coconut is a plant? Is it a plant? Yes, it is. So ASEAN countries produce coconuts, right? One of the most common products from the region. So coconut should be subject to pest control and contagious disease quarantine, right? Yes, that's true. Thank you very much.
Once again, I have a question to Mr. Young-Hoon Kim of Sangha Farm. So after 2019, it's been about 2 years now since the outbreak of COVID-19. The trade in Korea, I suppose it went downwards spiral and then it picked up the slack. So do you have any suggestions how we can overcome these challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic within the F&B sphere? Any thoughts? I suppose all, corporations, entrepreneurs are troubled with that specific question, how we can revitalize trading. I talked about food trends. So we have to think about the interest and needs and wants of each market segment. So what type of foods, what type of products are desired in a different channels, like online channel, and school cafeterias, and group consumers would obviously have different needs. So they are all very different. Obviously there are some overlapped areas per se, but we have to think about the trends and how they are moving. And based upon your product and its strengths, you have to target a specific market and cater to those markets to achieve success. And also you can work together with international institutes and agencies. And even now, many countries are, importing and exporting, because the F&B industry is all about stuff that we eat and consume. So that market strategy, that targeting strategy is going to work well. Thank you so much for your insight. So we talk about housing and clothing and food, and obviously one of the most important factors there is food. So in the food market, once that market picks up, I think that's going to be a great signal that general consumers have turned around. I have taken a look at relevant statistics. So as of last year, Korea and ASEAN countries. So I took a look at the list of traded items based upon the sales volume from number 1 all the way to number 200. So there were only 5 food items. The rest of them were electronics and other stuff. So of the ASEAN countries, so I'll give you the top 5 items, top 5 food items, that is shrimp, banana. So based upon the importation, obviously. So shrimp, banana, and we get octopus, chicken, and fish. So these top 5 food items that have been imported to Korea, the sales volume was only 2% of the entire the traded volume in its entirety. So as of last year, the traded volume to ASEAN countries was 20 billion. So as a result of it, we saw 35 billion in black. So it's been 12 years since we began our trading relations. I think it is very meaningful and timely for us to have this webinar on trade facilitation. So I would like to thank the organizers for hosting this meaningful event. And thank you so much once again, the speakers, for joining us today. Thank you.
And we will wrap up the roundtable discussions there. Once again, thank you to all speakers. and especially Mr. Cho Jung-hyun for moderating the discussion. And that brings us to the end of the live webinar on trade facilitation on the food and beverage industry between ASEAN and Korea. On behalf of the organizers, thank you very much for taking precious time out of your schedules to join us this afternoon, all speakers, panelists, and of course, our online viewers. Have a lovely evening, and we hope to see you all again in the very near future. Thank you and goodbye. 고맙습니다.